Directed to Mr. Anderson and Ms. Sears. The state of Israel has stopped all food and water from entering into Gaza since March 2nd, 2025. Every major international human rights organization has termed Israel's actions in Gaza a genocide. Will you commit to opposing the genocide and fully fund humanitarian efforts, including UNRWA? Mr. Anderson, please.
I'm sorry, I heard the preface, but I didn't hear the question.
Okay. I'll state it again. The state of Israel has stopped all food and water from entering into Gaza since March 2nd, 2025. Every major international human rights organization has termed Israel's actions in Gaza as a genocide. Will you commit to opposing the genocide and fully fund humanitarian efforts, including UNRWA?
No.
Of course. Will you explain why?
Genocide? Is that what you just said?
Okay, that's not a heckle time, please.
No,
Thank you.
I'm not heckling, I'm just practicing my explanation.
And he answered.
Let's see it as well.
Yeah, I, without hesitation, would say that the Liberal government will call for a ceasefire, full resumption of humanitarian aid immediately, as soon as possible, and a two-state solution.
Somebody else want to take that?
The NDP already proposed such legislation in our parliament calling for a ceasefire, for a two-way arms embargo, acknowledgement of the ICC and ICJ resolutions, and a Palestinian state on Palestinian territory, and that resolution was chipped away at by the other parties and was passed in very watered down form. The NDP still holds unequivocally that two-way arms embargo, a full and unmitigated ceasefire, and full humanitarian aid immediately.
The Green Party also supports all of those motions, and I am frankly a little bit surprised to hear no other response from our Conservative colleague.
Another question? Right here, I guess, first, in front.
Yes. So this is directed at Mr. Anderson, but I welcome anyone else to comment. Excuse me. In a social media post yesterday, you referred to people who do not support your bid for MP as the pitchfork crowd. If elected, how do you plan to reconcile that view with the requirement to represent all people from Vernon-Lake Country-Monashee, not just those who voted for you?
Well, the premise is incorrect. I did not refer to all people who did not support my candidacy at all. This was on a social media post where a business in Vernon specified that they were non-political and that they supported me because I supported them. That is what I said. As soon as they made that post, a bunch of people showed up and said that they were appalled by business endorsing the candidate. And I'm talking about, 10 or 20 people. Those are the people I referred to as the pitchfork crowd, and that's exactly what it was. It was a cancellation. It was a cancellation of a Vernon business for the gall of supporting me, not as a conservative, but as a human being. So if you're going to ask a question, please get your facts right when you're asking the premise, because it was a misleading question. It is incorrect in its facts, and it is incorrect in its supposed implied conclusion. Thank you.
No, right here?
Why do you need a mic? No, no, no. Chambers, Polyev has stated that he will enforce the notwithstanding clause. It is a potentially dangerous undertaking. That is very much what we're witnessing with what Donald Trump is doing, in that he's making his own rules to do what he wants, and I'd like to know if he would support that. Thank you.
Mr. Poilievre mentioned that he would use the notwithstanding clause to achieve one thing, and that was to keep murderers in jail.
I would like to point out that Donald Trump also said he was going to just be a dictator for one day. So we have to consider when people are willing to take power for just one thing, that it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I believe that the federal use of the notwithstanding clause sets a very dangerous precedent. I don't believe that anyone should have absolute power. I believe that in the principle of checks and balances in government, and if Mr. Polyev wants to change the law, he should work on changing the law the way that you're typically supposed to do it.
In the back there?
Hi. I would just like to say I thank you for the questions, and I was wondering, what if you were government or supporting the government, what would you do to improve our transportation system? As it is, we don't have Greyhound anymore. We're all reliant on having cars. Many years ago, I used to be able to travel nice distances in BC and see this beautiful province of ours. All that has gone by the way. We don't have rail. We could have high-speed rail like they have in other countries. Japan comes to mind, and China. China is big on high-speed rail. I'm just wondering if you could all give me your ideas of what you would do to improve our cross-country transportation system.
Thank you for the question. I think it would be terrific if in the infrastructure corridor that we're talking about, going from Vancouver over across Canada, that we could include much improved modern train system, passenger train system. But I think that the most important thing that we're talking about here is revival of regional bus services all around the province. When I was growing up in the Kootenays, the only way that we really could get out of town is on the Greyhound bus that went from Nelson over to Vancouver. I think I have a friend, and I had an elderly friend who's now passed, who was trying to get to the doctor in Trail and in Nelson in the hospitals for different treatments. She was not able to drive, and she had to rely on the kindness of strangers to get her there because there was no good regional transportation system. There are women who are going missing and murdered in the north because there is an inadequate regional transportation system. There's not even a really good timely bus service that goes down the length of the Okanagan. Since we lost Greyhound, it's very difficult. Even like there's the e-bus, but it's not convenient and it gets over full. It's just completely inadequate what we have right now. And a regional bus service should be infrastructure that's available to everybody. It should be a value so that we can have people, not just low-income people using the bus, not just elderly people using the bus, not just young people using the bus, but whoever does not want to drive in the winter should have access to that kind of transportation. Buses are low cost. We just have to want to do it, and I think it's reasonable to ask the federal government to contribute to it, because you can have buses from one province to another as well. So I'm all for regional transportation in whatever form it takes. Thank you.
resolution to the Board of Directors of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities asking that we engage the federal government in talks about replacing Greyhound, which was in the process of pulling out of Canada, period. Those talks were actually initiated and were ongoing until the dissolution of the Trudeau government. I'm waiting to see if the Carney government will pick up that portfolio and run with it. There are a number of different aspects to transportation. There's regional transportation, which actually is a provincial jurisdiction that is supported by funding from the federal government and the provincial government and from local taxation. When we talk about the infrastructure corridor from one side of Canada to the other, that's not a done deal. It's a great vision, but it needs to be developed from the bottom up, not from the top down. We have to be very sensitive towards communities, towards nations that live with us and among us, and that the corridor needs to be developed in conjunction, in collaboration, and in cooperation. And yes, it would be great to see high-speed rail. I'd love it. There are other pieces that go along with it. It's not just east to west, it's north to south as well. So the transportation piece in Canada is very interestingly complex, and work has been begun on it, and I was part of that work.
Thank you for the great question. So one of the things that we really need here in Canada is high-speed rail, is effective public transportation that is better than driving a car. The idea of changing to clean, sustainable energy and not relying on the fossil fuel industry, which is shedding jobs regardless of the $20+ billion we've subsidized it for, is that people have options, and those options are not buying an electric car. I can't afford an electric car. I can't afford to charge an electric car. I don't really know many people who can, regardless of rebates. The option has to be effective public transportation. And in doing this, we would not be removing the option for people who want to drive or prefer to be in their own individual vehicle, but rather to make a public transportation system that is so robust that it's actually favored by most people. This would also allow for the movement of people. I know here in Lumby, it can be really challenging to get to Vernon and have access to cheaper groceries unless you have a car. Imagine if we could hop on a bus that came more than every few hours, or if there was a rail system. And I know a lot of people say it's impossible. Canada is so big. So I really appreciate that you brought up China. Thank you very much. China is massive. But we also have had rail here. And now it's the rail trail, which is lovely to walk on, but it makes me sad that we ripped out all of that railroad. So it's been done. We did it with less technology than we have now. It would improve our quality of life. It would create jobs. It would make transportation cheaper. And it would help us with the climate crisis. So I'm absolutely for increasing our public transportation. And I think it's imperative that we start right away and that we have federal support and funding for it.
Thank you. I'd just like to point out that oil and gas is shedding jobs because the government is shutting it down, not because there are any lack of jobs there if the government had the will to keep them open. The transportation corridor that my Liberal colleague mentioned, like the temporary pause on one part of the gas tax, is another platform, another plank borrowed from the Conservative Party who came up with it a long time ago. It was very popular, and so it's been borrowed by the Liberals. Transportation is an interesting thing in real life. It's nice to say we should be able to do that. We should be able to do a lot of things. We should be able to travel to the other side of the country instantly with no emissions at all. But we have to live in the world of the living and of the reality. Vernon, for instance, is a city that is right on the cusp. It is too big, it's big enough to need a bus system, but it's too small to support a full-time bus system. And so what it has is a sort of cherry-pick system that the most people using it, they'll keep those lines open, but shut down other ones that don't work. It's not adequate, and the problem is that most people don't use it because it's so small and because it's so segmented. So we have to look at reality as well as what should be. It would be lovely to have high-speed rail all across the country to every city, every town, every village in Canada. But it's not financially reasonable. It's not sustainable. We cannot do it because we don't have the money. And if we want to have the money to do things like that, we need to supercharge our economy. We have the means. We have a resource-based economy that we could open up if we want to. The Conservative government means to open it up. The Liberals want to keep resources in the ground, and that's why all these great ideas are still great ideas and not reality. Thank you.
Can I offer a rebuttal? Are we allowed rebuttals?
Short one.
Okay, thank you.
It's really not a debate, so you know what I mean?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak briefly to this idea of opening up our resources and getting them out of the ground. The idea that we need to let large corporate business owners buy parts of Canada with no permitting and no Indigenous consultation is illegal and is also extremely detrimental to all of us who have to live here. For the benefit of wealthy corporate owners, that money is not coming to you and me. That money is going in the pocket of business owners, if that were to happen. In order to supercharge the economy, we have to consider that putting all of our eggs into the basket of the oil and gas industry, which has an expiry date, is not a long-term viable solution. We cannot base our economy off something that's going to run out. It's time to move toward long-term future planning. That's the only way to be fiscally responsible. So if we want to supercharge our economy, we need to invest in Canadians. We need to build more housing. We need to create public transportation. And we need to do all these things with the clean energy and technology that is available right now. Other countries are far surpassing us. It's time for Canada to also step into this and not be left behind when all of our gas and oil runs out and our resources have been exploited.
But wait, God says we can't have nice things.
That's true.
The question here, and then we'll go across the floor that way.
Can I ask a question about that question?
After, in turn.
I'll be all right. This also has to do with freedom of expression and our charter rights. The government of Canada has adopted a definition of anti-Semitism that suggests that any criticism of the actions of the State of Israel is, in fact, anti-Semitism. Of course, it is not. To criticize the actions of another country is not anti-Semitism. We have heard that Mr. Poilievre is planning on using the notwithstanding clause. And he has talked about his attack on a woke agenda. But how will you protect the rights of Canadians to engage in peaceful advocacy for the human rights of the Palestinian people without fear of repercussions for all, please?
Want to take a crack at that?
Sure, I'll take a crack at that one. To be in support of Palestinian autonomy and survival is not anti-Semitic. To be opposed to the militaristic, Zionism of Israel as a state is not anti-Semitic.
For real?
For real.
No.
To criticize the actions of a state is entirely different than criticizing the actions of a religion, the beliefs of a religion. Zionism does not represent Judaism.
They're blocking.
No heckling, please.
synagogues. They're praying in the street and blocking.
Excuse me, no heckling, please.
Okay.
We'll get our turns to ask questions.
I unequivocally support the right of Palestine to survive, to thrive, to achieve a political solution, and I absolutely support the necessity of implementing humanitarian aid and enforcing a ceasefire, and that is not anti-Semitic.
I think we do need to peel back to first principles and look at the Canadian Human Rights Code and look at freedom of speech, and that should be the basis of how these decisions are made. Canada is based on very strong founding principles, the Constitution that protects people, protects speech, and we need to go back to that.
Yeah, we all have the right to peaceful protest. It should not be limited. When we start saying that certain people are not allowed to stand up and say what they think and they believe in a peaceful way, then we are no longer a democratic Canada. All of us have the right to stand up and say what we think and what we believe.
Except tractor.
And I think that that is a really great thing, right? So we need to use caution when we start saying everyone can speak except for those people. What happens when somebody says everyone can speak except for us or except for you? At what point do we draw the line? And I think this is one of the really scary things we're seeing from the United States right now, where the use of even the word woman in any research is not allowed anymore, right? We're actually being advised, like I'm doing research right now on wildfire evacuation. We're being advised that we cannot travel to the United States if we're researchers, because the words that we use are not allowed anymore. I'm not even researching anything to do with what currently that administration is against, but it's so dangerous to use any words that we are not, it's advised for us not to go there. I would hate to see Canada come under such a threat. And it is a threat. As I've said before, words have power. We have freedom of speech in this country. We need to protect it at all costs.
I actually agree with that. I am a strong advocate of freedom of speech. The question as posed is absolutely reasonable. Criticizing a country for something is not racist. It is not insulting to any one group except the leaders of that country. I think what I have a problem with though is I see a number of Palestinian scarves in here, and I'm wondering why there are no Ukrainian scarves or no Malian scarves, or why Palestine is singled out for this sort of thing. Because that does speak to something else. Nobody is criticizing Russia with the same vigor and a degree in saying that this is racism, despite the fact that the cities along the Eastern Front are being indiscriminately bombed. And they're not being bombed with 200-pound bombs like World War II. They're being bombed with Fab 1500s, Fab 3000s, which are bombs that will take down an entire building. I just wonder why all the focus is on criticism of Israel in particular. Because that is not criticizing a country to the extent, the input from that's going into this is out of all proportion to the actions of Israel itself. Thank you.
There was no debate. Last question over here.
I find it surprising that you think that Canada has free speech. The truckers who went to Ottawa outside of Canada were heroes. Within Canada, not so much. So my question is, under what circumstances should government restrict individual freedoms?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, you raise a really good point. And so it becomes not an issue of freedom of speech when it begins to impact other people's livelihood. And so there is a degree of we all have to live here together. So, to my understanding, that is where the line comes in. You're allowed to peacefully protest whatever it is. And I think that's really important, and we need to protect that at all costs. However, you're not allowed to disrupt other people going about their lives. That then becomes not a peaceful protest. But there, as we've seen, there is a lot of gray area there. There's a lot of challenge and a lot of complexity. And I think that it's something that we need to continue to revisit in order to make sure that it adequately reflects what Canadians want in their democracy.
I think freedom of speech is incredibly important, but there's some kind of a boundary, and maybe it's a gray line between freedom of speech and hate speech. And hate speech is might even need to be revisited and reinterpreted as society moves along. What exactly constitutes hate speech? But Nazism clearly had hate speech involved in it. Speech where you're organizing other people to go out and harm other people. There's examples of hate speech throughout society, but we just have to, I agree with you, we have to be incredibly careful in who's defining that, how it's defined, and we have to keep meeting and having a dialogue over it.
We have a question over here. He's been.
Sorry, I would like to hear from.
Only if he wants to respond, yeah.
Well, I don't think the prohibition's being universally applied. I think breaking windows, blocking railway tracks, blocking roads, things like that, actually disrupts people's lives, a lot of people's lives. Whether or not that's worse when you're destroying public property or private property, whether that's worse than sitting in the middle of the road honking, I'll leave that up to the audience to decide. I think the problem is when you start invoking Emergencies Act and things like this, unless you're going to apply that policy universally, it should not be used at all. So I don't think it's a gray area. I think it's a pretty stark area that if you're going to break the law, you should be stopped and you should be put in jail. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm okay. Can you hear me?
I think this question is first to Mr. Anderson because it's about the environment and you weren't able to make the forum, SENS forum on the environment the other week. So climate change is an existential threat. In this area, we've experienced it as wildfires, heat dome, drought, floods, landslips, and sort of extreme weather events that affect our crops. So my question to you, and I would be interested in hearing the other three parties as well answer this, is two parts. The first part is, what do you think are the most important things your party is doing to address this existential threat? And the second part is, what do you think is can be done to secure food and water, some of the most important needs that we have for our community in the face of this threat? So resiliency with regards to food and water. Thank you.
Sure. My father was actually, I grew up in India. I moved there when I was 5 years old because my father was head of the India wheat program. When we moved there, India was in a situation where people were starving, and I mean really starving. The bullock cart would go through downtown New Delhi, picking up bodies in the morning. That's how dire it was. When we left in later on, 7 years later, India was actually exporting wheat. So I had some familiarity with food security. And this is at a time when the population bomb was the big existential threat of the universe at the time. Ehrlichman had convinced people. My father was a PhD. He and all of his colleagues had bought in completely to this sort of Manichean sort of threat that the world was going to be simply starved to death from overpopulation. It turned out not to be true. What do we think we're doing to create climate change? We're all concerned about climate change. It is in the resolution of it that we differ. We can either halt emissions through simply saying we're not going to do it anymore and try to turn to an immature technology, that being electric right now. It is not mature enough for deployment in a cold situation like Canada. It will not replace oil and gas sufficiently, as everybody that has an electric car understands today. So we are encouraging technology that will do this. We cannot pretend we're in 1850 and ban the horse and wait another 50 years for the gasoline engine to be developed. We cannot do that, and that's what we're trying to do today. We're trying to ban oil and gas before we've got a technological replacement for it. So that's the outlook that we're taking on this. To secure food and water, keep growing. I mean, there is no magic bullet for any of the problems that we face. And if we adopt a baseline of perfection and saying that we're going to cure all of these problems 100%, we're never going to do it. So we have to work. We have to draw balances between the possible and the ideal, and that's where we're going with this. Thank you.
I maybe missed it, but I didn't really hear a plan in there. I really think that in order to secure food and water in this area where we see the impacts on our crop growth every single year, I know for one, I used to can peaches every summer. Last summer there were no peaches. I cannot express to you how devastating this was, but beyond peaches, that's real economic impact for those farmers, because it's not just me buying the peaches, it's the entire Okanagan, it's the export of those peaches, and that's only one fruit. I think we're all very familiar with the food security issues here. We need to have a real plan right now to help farmers, which will help us and will help our economy. That includes investing in technology that I'm excited to say exists right now. We have the technology to reduce emissions considerably. We have the technology to be helping farmers move to regenerative agriculture. All of that exists right now. We need to implement it right now. and the Conservatives continuing to say that it doesn't exist against all evidence to the contrary just doesn't seem like an effective plan to me.
It's a big question, and it has a myriad of small actions that will solve it. It's not that we are going to overnight move from using oil and gas to only using electricity. We are going to make small incremental changes as individuals, as societies, as countries. One of the things that the NDP is proposing is a clean energy grid from east to west to north. That will make a difference because we will get some of our northern communities off diesel generation of electricity. Manitoba is already starting to build that northern line. Our systems of agriculture need to be looked at. Some of them will need to be changed. We need to create and acknowledge food sheds that we can grow most of our own food within a day's travel across the country and from top to bottom of the country. We might not have oranges year-round, but we will have food. Regenerative agriculture, protection of our water, re-examination of how we harvest our forest resources. A lot of things need to change, and they are starting to change, and they will continue to change, and we really, really hope that they change quick enough to have an effect. To say, to accuse that we are seeking perfection and therefore not able to do anything is nonsense. Sure, we want perfection, but we also recognize that we're going to stumble and fall. We're going to get a little bit better each time, and we are going to make it across the finish line. Hopefully, before we have another cataclysm. I was evacuated from my town last summer. That was the result of years of climate change, drying of the forest, improper shepherding of our water resources. We have learned some lessons, we have made some changes, and hopefully I won't be evacuated again this year.
Yeah, Mary, that's a big question. Two big questions. The Mark Carney government is takes climate change very seriously, but it's a transition to green energy. It's a transition that includes the use of oil and gas at this time while we are transitioning to an electrified economy. This is going to involve us transporting oil and gas to other countries. It's going to involve us freeing ourselves from the dependence on U.S. oil processing. It is going to involve us completely building expanding the grid. One of the things that's happening globally is that the cost of renewable energy is going rapidly down, particularly solar panels. They're right now the cheapest form of energy that's out there, and it's driving a lot of other kinds of coal and natural gas power plants out of business in different parts of the country where there's a lot of it. The thing about it, of course, is it's intermittent, but if we can connect the intermittent renewable energy with, for example, our hydropower or the hydropower in Quebec and Ontario, and also in places where it's appropriate, natural gas power plants, nuclear power plants, we can have a very robust energy system. Canada can become an energy superpower compared with other countries in the globe. We can do this in a way that transitions us to a lower carbon economy. And Mark Carney is also very passionate about carbon capture. So that's the whole mitigation end of things. Personally, in my career, I have worked with communities to become what we call climate adaptation. What kind of improvements do we need for our infrastructure to protect communities from floods? What do we need to do to our creek banks? How do we build up dikes? How do we reduce fire risks around our cities and towns? How do we improve agricultural irrigation systems so that we don't demand quite as much water for our farms? There's a million things that we need to do at that level. That is infrastructure, and that is something that the federal government under Mark Carney is going to invest in. From the second question about what we can do to protect Canadian food in the face of climate change, well, there's a lot of answers to that as well. The extreme weather, it's going to come, it's going to go. One of the things that the Carney government is doing is it is doubling the amount of crop insurance that's available for farmers, because for crop insurance will take you over a bad year so that you can replant the next year. A lot of federal funding came for last year for the massive death of soft fruits and grapes for replant programs. It was funneled through the provincial government. We also are looking at expanding marketing of Canadian products to other countries and develop better marketing within Canada. So there's a million things that we can do to help make us more resilient to climate change. Thank you.